Low fine people. Michael here from Mountain Strong. Cup of coffee today. Brazil from Idle Hands Roasting Company. It's a it's a light roast. It is not quite as fruity and acidic as I often like, but I'll say it's really good, and it's really nice on a Tuesday morning on the back porch. Let's talk about what we can do when our training has stalled. And I'll give you a couple of examples of training stalling, right? One is that you have been trying to grow your arms, and so you're doing bicep curls and you're training your arms 2 or 3 days a week, and it used to work and it is no longer working. Second type of stall that we could be talking about might be that you are working on developing a new skill. Let's say it's within climbing or mountain biking, and you've been practicing that skill, you've been focusing on that skill, and you're not getting payoff on that. The third is in the category of pure endurance, where we say, hey, I've been trying to improve my 1 mile pace, or I've been trying to improve on a known segment on Strava, or literally just like I'm getting on the bike trainer and I'm on a program that should be improving my wattage per kilogram, and it has stalled. Why would these types of training stalls happen? I'm going to suggest that we break it into three categories, the rule of three. All good things come in threes. And let's take a look at this. So the first reason why our training might be stalled is that we might be overstretched, overstressed. We may actually be hitting, for us, for an individual, what we would consider to be maximum recoverable volume. And you simply can't recover from a certain amount of volume. And how much volume we can recover from is different for each one of us. There's no rule that says this is what it is, but the people who adapt to their training, the people who get the most benefit from their training, whether again that's bigger arms, bigger shoulders, faster pace or faster skill development, are those who work near the upper limit of their maximum recoverable volume. They put in a lot of effort, they put in a lot of time on it, but they don't overstretch themselves. Again, we have to find this for ourselves. So how would you know if you are overstretched? How would you know if you're overstressed? How would you know if you're bumping up against maximum recoverable volume? There's a bunch of paradigms that we could use. One of my favorites is the 3 H's: hungry, horny, happy. How is your mood usually? Are you usually happy? And in this phase of time, in this time when it feels like your training is stalled, are you still happy? And you might be frustrated because your training is feeling like it's stalled, but outside of that, do you enjoy work? Do you enjoy socializing? Is your mood good? How is your libido? Are you as frisky as you usually are? And how is your appetite? How's your digestion? Do you have the same desires to eat? And are you digesting your food pretty well? Are you pooping regularly? The reason why happy, horny, and healthy works nicely is that it gives us some output measurements from the black box, and the black box rather, and we'll just take the human organism as this black box. And if things are working well inside the black box, then we should generally be happy, horny, and hungry on a regular basis. And if things aren't working as well, then we're going to start to see those things go. And we could always do blood tests. We could check our cortisol or our testosterone, our estrogen levels, our thyroid function. But happy, horny, and hungry serve almost as leading indicators to tell us, hey, maybe we're overdoing it. So if you notice those things are slipping, good sign that you might be a little bit overstretched. Another way of thinking about that would be looking at your sleep quality and your desire to train. And if these things are down, then again, it's a good indication that you might be overstretched. Fixing overstretchedness, or in other words, sometimes we just call it overtraining, or overreaching, often means taking a week, maybe two, at lower volume. In the world of strength, if this was someone who's said, hey, my biceps, my arms have just stopped growing. I'm like, all right, well, how long have we been doing this? Maybe what we need to do is take a week and either totally away from the gym or just deload, and we're going to reduce volume by, say, half. In terms of endurance work, we might do the same thing and say, hey, we're going to reduce our total volume. Mileage, I really prefer if people talk in terms of time on their feet, but we might say, hey, I'm going to reduce the time on my feet by a quarter for this next week and see how I feel. And that should give us a kind of an updated, revamped vigor for training. That's what we want to see. If we're talking skill work, actually spending some time focusing on other skills might be the way to do that. We each have a maximum learning rate. You can only learn things so fast. And if we're bumping up against skill limitations continuously, then sometimes we're shifting our focus away from that one skill, or even breaking that skill down into smaller pieces can be really helpful. And if you are continually challenging yourself with new skills, then you're continuously riding this wave of frustration. I was a classroom teacher for 11 years. And one of the notions that I think is really helpful is that when it comes to challenge, when it comes to like the degree of challenge that a thing presents for us, there's three categories. There's the category of really easy. These are the skills that we've mastered. Like this is the category of mastery. And when we do things that we have mastered, we're not learning much. We might be learning new tricks, but we're not learning a whole lot when we just practice things that we've mastered. But the things we've mastered, we actually get to ingrain it even deeper into our memory and make it more fluid, more consistent. There's that like small challenge, or there's this window of really what we consider to be appropriate challenge, where let's just say that we have a 50% error rate. Half the time we get it right, half the time we get it wrong. And it's not frustrating. It's not too easy. It's also not over frustrating. It's kind of in that sweet spot. And I know there's formal language for this. I'll admit I forgot what it was. Then there's the high end, which is that thing that is that is true challenge and challenge to the point of frustration. And it is worth doing things that are a challenge to the point of frustration sometimes. I think back to my experiences with jujitsu in the beginning. It was all frustration. It was all challenge to the point of frustration. And therefore, it was like not the only thing I was doing, because I couldn't handle that frustration all the time. So if you're feeling overstretched, let's just say, hey, you might need to reduce the volume, or you might also need to reduce the volume that you're spending at that upper edge of kind of this frustration spectrum from too easy to too hard. One last piece here, specifically about training in the gym. I'm not going to dive deep into technique right now, but if your goal is to grow bigger arms or bigger shoulders and you're finding like your training is stalled, there is a question as well of, has your technique been good? Has your technique been great? Has your technique been stable, the same from session to session? That can make it really hard to measure. And so that's just another question to consider if you feel like your in the gym training has stalled. The second reason why our training might stall is that we've actually hit a level of adaptation where we've gotten so good that our adaptations we've kind of maximized our adaptations to it, and now those adaptations are slowing down. So an example, if we think back to when any of us started a new thing, right? It doesn't matter if it's baking bread or climbing or running. There is an initial, oh my gosh, this is great. And we get really excited. And within that excitement, we also find a lot of progress really, really fast. If you're learning to bake bread, and I started baking bread just a couple of years ago, well after COVID, but I was getting into pizza dough and I was like, oh, hey, I want to try doing some bread recipes too. So I started baking bread. And I remember my first two experiences mixing dough, I could not understand how this like wet mess was going to get from one container into the baking dish that it was going to go into. And the problem was, like, I'd made a mistake, right? I had done something wrong. And then the second time I did it, I had the same thing, but I was like, wait a second. Okay. Double check my measurements. Okay. All of my measurements are good. I did something wrong. The third time, between the second and the third, I actually figured out what had gone wrong, which was I had literally not worked the dough enough. I had not done enough hands-on manual labor to develop gluten. Point being that when you are doing something new, our adaptations tend to come pretty fast. We get the new skill pretty fast. We do our error analysis typically pretty fast. If you go from not running to running, well, then it's like, man, you can go from a 15-minute pace to a 15-minute per mile pace down to a 12-minute per mile pace over the course of a few weeks, because you're going from 0 to something, right? And that adaptation is going to be the fastest adaptation we ever get. And if we just walk that forward, adaptations will slow down. We would expect that to happen. And so you might be at that place where the curve of adaptations has slowed down, and you might have actually even maximized it, and your training might be in one way or another stale. Within strength training, this is typically we talk about it. Maybe we have an exercise that is stale, and we need to change it because maybe we're getting some joint irritation, and so we think about a change in exercise selection. But just even cognitively, right? It's like there's a reason why we have a dozen different ways of doing bicep curls, more than that, obviously, truly. But part of the benefit of that is that if one gets stale, even if it doesn't hurt the joints, it is sometimes helpful every 3 months or so to swap one out, put another exercise into the plan to keep going with it. So we have something that is cognitively different. When it comes to our training, a really good example of this is if we are training up in zone, if we're doing our endurance training, say cycling or running, and we're spending a lot of time in high zone 3 to like the bottom of zone 4, and we're doing these like real powerful bursts, there's a limit to how much adaptation we can get from training at that level, from training at that end of things. And what we often need to do is actually bring it back and train easier for a while. So I'm not going to do a deep dive right now into zone training and how Mountain Strong thinks about this. But I'll just say on the low end, I mean, if you probably are, you might be familiar with the concept of zone 2, our training at our aerobic threshold, Maffetone, maximum aerobic function, Phil Maffetone came up with this. Peter Attia and Johnson and House have talked about it. Evoke Endurance Coaching talks about this. And everything I've seen with my clients also says like, yeah, this is true. This is accurate. This is good stuff. And so we can go to Steven Seiler's idea of polarized training and say, hey, what we have is effectively low end training, low end and high end. And low end is building aerobic function and high end is building anaerobic function. And if every time you go out and run or you go for a bike ride, you are pushing really, really hard, and you might have days that you push easier, but it's because you feel tired and you're like, oh, it's going to be an easy day, but you're still pushing against the limit of what you can do on that day. You're actually always pushing up against the high end of that lactate threshold or that anaerobic threshold. By doing so, you get really, really good up there, but you miss the adaptations that come from lower. I ran into a friend of mine yesterday who is training for Fire Academy. She's going to become a firefighter. And she had been doing all this high end, this high performance output, 8 minutes on a treadmill or on a stair stepper with a weight vest and a sandbag on her shoulder, because that's how she's going to be tested. And the thought there is absolutely right. She's like nailed it, that she wants to spend some time in training doing what it's going to look like to be tested. However, what was happening was she was getting so anaerobically adapted that she was not getting any aerobic. She wasn't getting the aerobic adaptations needed to support that. She was on this curve where her adaptations were starting to slow down. There just wasn't room for her to get better at the suffering, or at least it was going to be at a really low rate. The answer for her was, hey, let's program some more zone 2 work. Let's program some low intensity stuff, long duration, build that system. So sometimes what happens if we feel like our training has been stalled is that we're actually adapted to what we've been doing and we need to do something new. That's it. And then the last one is, here's the hard part, right? I don't ever think when with the people who are gonna listen, talk to me and listen to me are rarely the people who don't do enough. If you are here, the odds are you probably aren't doing too little. That is not your problem. If your training has stalled, what might be happening is simply that you have been doing too much and foot needs to come off the gas pedal for a little while to allow those adaptations to absorb, allow the central nervous system to recover its local fatigue. We may need to think about improving sleep, improving food, right? There's a whole bunch of ways we can deal with that side. Another might be that your training might be getting stale because you have been on the same thing for a long time. You've been pushing your anaerobic threshold all the time. You're never going long and easy and slow. And you need this to build this. That could be a problem. You might be hammering your side delts, shoulder. You might be hammering your shoulders all the time in the gym because you want them to grow. But like now you're dealing with joint pain, or the exercises you've been doing are simply stale and you need some variety. All of these are true. But there is also a third option. And this is the hard one. Everything might actually be working, and you might just be feeling too impatient. That's hard, right? Because what it means is you have to trust yourself. You have to trust the process. You have to trust the idea. And how do you know? How can you be sure that the problem is simply that you're impatient, that you haven't given enough time? Well, bad news, you'll never really know, right? I don't think there is a way to say definitively, hey, yep, impatience is your problem. Give it another 2 months thing. But this is where having another view of your training can be really, really helpful. One option would be upload your training plan to ChatGPT and say, hey, ChatGPT, I want you to act like a professional strength coach or an endurance coach, and I want you to apply the principles from this system or that system and tell me, where am I going wrong? What am I missing? You could try that. You could also talk to or work with the coach. This is a thing that we do. We do training plan audits where we'll look at your training plan and give you some feedback on what's there, what's missing. Thinking in terms of seasons, right? Are you off season or in season, or are you off season or preseason or in season? Knowing where you are relative to your primary sport or to the thing that you really want to train for is important. If, like me, what you're doing is really just training for life, training for the ability to do anything at any moment, be able to wrestle with your kid. And my 35-pound 4-year-old yesterday was like, Dad, pick me up and carry me up the stairs. I was like, cool, huck him on my shoulder and go do that and like feel confident about it. That's what I'm into it for. So whatever it is, making sure that your training plan is serving your goals. That's how you can figure out whether or not you're being impatient. Because like often we just need to get some other input on it. You could also just simply try another month or two of patience and see if things turn around. So guys, that is it. If your training is feeling stalled, consider, is it a problem with being overstretched and overstressed? Have your adaptations simply slowed down? And because you've kind of reached a maximum and what you need is some variety in your training. And again, if you're really close to your season, if you're burning really, really hard just before cycling season, just before the fall and you're a competitive cyclocross racer, or if you've been burning really, really hard into December, January, and what you're into is skimo racing, it's like you're kind of setting yourself up for failure or for a challenge. Probably need to be, peaking earlier so that we can recover and then get into the season. But the third option is, of course, maybe everything is working just fine and you are simply feeling impatient. If you need some help, reach out. I'd love to know how this resonates with you. Hit it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, Have a great day. Maybe enjoy a good cup of coffee.